and so, and then subsequently I went back in 2008. Nightline, ABC Nightline adapted the first chapter of my book, and I went down to film with them and made sure to see her. And she was a completely changed person. She initiated conversation. She was very direct. She spoke about the challenges that she was facing, but she also spoke about the fact that she was doing decently in school. She had to walk 3 kilometers each way every day to go to school over really forbidding terrain. But I mean, as her mother said, children in that part of the world are a lot tougher than children in this part of the world, and that's what her mother said. And she was planning on being a doctor. Planned on after she graduated high school, going to university, and she said the reason I want to be a doctor is because there are no doctors in my community, and that's one big reason why children get given away, because there's no way that their parents can take care of them here. So, that being the situation, I do feel like. And I've gone so far afield from your original question, I can't remember what it was. What was it? Oh, greatest accomplishment. Yeah. Oh, so CAMCs. CAMCs is my greatest accomplishment. Please. Sure. Yeah. I sort of stopped at the first. I first stopped over there. I went to college at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. Graduated, and that was basically because that's where I got in. I'm from Wisconsin originally. I would have gone to UW-Madison, which, like UNL, is a terrific school. I was kind of eager to get away from home, and now I love going back. And now that I've spent, and there's no place like the Midwest that, I mean, and I include Nebraska in that. It really feels like home for me. But I started working at this think tank in New York. Worked for a journalist, first as an intern, then as a research associate, which is a very fancy way of saying fact checker slash phone answerer slash faxer, etc. But I learned a lot from him. He was a great boss, and I think finding a mentor is something that it's kind of luck of the draw, but it's also there's a lot of intentionality about it. And so going out and working for somebody that inspires you, who you would want to be in a few years potentially, that's the greatest piece of single piece of career advice that I can give any of you. Finding and looking at how they do what they do and deciding and being open and being flexible. Maybe there are parts of their lives or their work that just seem miserable to you, steering your career to mitigate that is really important. After I worked for Walter Russell Mead was his name. After I worked for Walter, I was hired to work for Richard Holbrooke. I don't know if you guys know his name, but he was Clinton's UN ambassador, and he's now the special representative for the administration to Afghanistan and Pakistan. That was fascinating. I learned I didn't want to be an ambassador, and I didn't want to be I didn't want to be a government official. But he was in terms of learning about foreign policy in the 20th century, he was this canonical source of knowledge. And I worked for him. I subsequently worked for David Halberstam, another great journalist who wrote The Best and the Brightest, a chronicle of how the Kennedy team got it wrong in Vietnam, and worked with him on a book on Korea that he turned out to be the last book that he ever wrote. He was killed shortly afterwards. But a a terrific a terrific mentor as well. And then you know, there comes a stage where you have to take off the training wheels and work for yourself. And uh, one of the big challenges in journalism is that there isn't a lot of money in this field. I mean, that's not why we do it. And the the money comes, and it isn't much money, but a certain amount of money comes after you make a name and you publish, and you can command a bit more on both writing and speaking fees and that kind of thing. But it's a long road to get there, and so I got lucky. Um, I worked very hard on a book proposal and got a great advance. And the reason I was lucky was in the timing. In '05, when I was the beginning of '05, when I was getting that book advance, was really coming up to the peak of the publishing market, and then it's really gone downhill considerably over the last couple of years. And so that isn't necessarily a way to do it anymore. But there's foundation money. The one nice thing about being a journalist is there's a lot of money out there in foundations, and I think increasingly that's going to be the way that entrepreneurial journalism is done. You go out and you seek these grants, and then you go and you report, and you'll get paid a little bit by the magazines, but the whole foreign correspondent model and bureau chief model is really becoming a thing of the past. Sriani, I see you standing up. Okay. Um, I mean, seeing Cam C's again was very moving. But I mean, the nature of this work is that everybody's story is pretty moving. I could pick anything. I'll pick one that doesn't have to do with slavery, but seeing as how this is a class on journalism, not on slavery, I'll tell this. It's fresh in my mind because it just took place in Afghanistan. But there was a man who said he was 50 years old, although you talk to Afghans in rural areas of a certain economic strata who are over a certain age, and they won't have any idea how old they are. And he was very old, and he was very shaky. And I was interviewing him outside of a polling station in Bamiyan, and he had essentially one leg. He had taken 8 bullets in the Soviet invasion, which had left one of his legs withered to the point of, in any other society context, they would have been amputated. But they didn't have the basic medical facilities or know-how to do that. So he'd been living with this withered leg for 30 years, which he had fashioned a crutch a homemade crutch that he'd sort of wrapped his leg around. He was. I did a 10-minute interview with him. He said it was the first time anybody had ever asked him about his life story, which is very often the case for the people that I talk to, and that inherently for me is moving. The oldest human longing is self-confession. I think that was Zora Neale Hurston maybe that said that, and it's an emotional experience for people when they're telling their stories for the first time in their lives, and this man told me his story concisely. And under when the Taliban had overrun his province, Bamiyan, he had hid in caves after the Taliban had burned his small house to the ground and killed his entire family. And at this point, he was a landless farmer, without family, without land, without penny to his name, subsistence, working for others. And he had one leg, and old and shaking. And he had walked 4 kilometers that day and stood in line 90 minutes to vote, because he believed that would change the course of his life, and that would be the right thing to do for his community. And so we can denigrate all we like, and I think there's a great deal of criticism that should be leveled at the Afghan government and for their handling of these elections, these parliamentary elections, and elections generally in that country. But one thing we shouldn't question is the will of a great deal of people in Afghanistan to stand up and speak for themselves, if given the opportunity. And it's also something we should all think about as citizens of this country before we decide to shrug off voting in the midterm elections coming up.